Town of Sykesville's Mayor and Town Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, June 21st, 2022. I will call the meeting to order at 7:02.30 seconds. Let's begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. Okay, everybody, thank you. All right, first, as usual, our public comments. Is there anyone here this evening from the gallery that wishes to make a public comment? Okay, so we'll quickly review or approve our minutes and then move on to our presentation with Dr. Wack. So both the minutes from May 3rd, which required some edits, those edits have been included in the versions that you guys have this evening. And the minutes from May 23rd were made available. Unless anyone has any need to discuss either of those, then we can motion to approve both.
Motion to approve minutes from May 3rd and May 23rd.
Second. Okay, great. So Councilman Grassley with a motion and Councilman Dyer with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That's everyone. Anyone opposed? All right. Minutes from May 3rd and May 23rd, 2022 have been approved unanimously. And we have a special guest speaker here this evening. I'm very excited for all of you to hear from him. But first, just hand it off to Councilman Dyer. Perhaps he can add some color to the context of Dr. Wack's visit. Introduce him properly.
Thank you. Dr. Robert Wack is the Deputy Health Officer with the Carroll County Health Department. But that's not why he's here. He is a true Renaissance man. I did some research on you and found out Carroll Magazine listed some of the roles that you filled when you were Person of the Year in 2004. Listen to this, everybody. Pediatrician, Westminster Council member, political activist, social champion, entrepreneur, history buff, editor, editorial letter writer, aspiring author, karate student, devoted husband, doting father, steadfast friend, and until September 29th of 2001, he was the president of the board of directors of the Mid-Atlantic Gigabit Innovation Collaboratory, also known as MAGIC. In short, he knows his stuff. I found a quote, though, that I've got to read. It's a paragraph, but it's worth it. I recently reflected on Carroll County's successful fiber optic broadband infrastructure technology beginning and fondly recalled the many-day early Carroll County Technology Council meetings to discuss the issue. Dr. Robert Wack was front and center of the public discourse from the very beginning and articulated a passionate, future-oriented vision for the county where businesses and residents have high-speed broadband service access and, more importantly, I think, choice. Dr. Wack is an inspirational and strategic leader that is respected for his galvanizing efforts to advance high-speed broadband access throughout our community. That was Denise Beaver, Secretary of the Carroll Economic Development. So he's here tonight to talk to us. If we have the courage and the determination, we can make Sykesville as successful as Westminster in creating our own municipal broadband infrastructure. And with that, I would ask Dr. Wack to take over.
Should clap back.
Yes, please.
Right on time.
It's all lies. Thank you, Mark, Councilman Dyer. That's very kind of you. You know, I have been involved in a lot of stuff. Ann and I were in the same karate class many years ago. That was fun. So I guess I don't need to give you any of my background since Councilman Dyer gave it to you. So we'll just jump right into our discussion here. So I met with Mayor Link and Councilman Dyer, just kind of talk about what we did in Westminster and why we did it and how we did it. And it was a great conversation. At the end of that conversation, we decided that what I would present to you guys is sort of a boiled down version of just the basic, you know, who, what, why of what we did in Westminster. And Ms. Levan was also played a role in that. She was our legal counsel negotiating our agreements and whatnot. It's a great story. So yeah, the what, why, and how of municipal broadband and for Sykesville maybe. Next slide. So so let's start with let's define some terms here. Generally, or from the highest level, broadband is just being able to access high capacity data services. Everything we do now on the internet is just moving data. And what constrains what you can do and how fast you can do it and how many people can do it at the same time is the capacity of your connection or the amount of bandwidth that you have. So that's what we're talking about, is creating the infrastructure to allow that service to exist. That infrastructure consists of small strands of glass called fiber optic strands that are bundled together into cables. And in each cable, you can have anywhere from 2 to 12 to 24 to hundreds of strands. And then the really cool thing from a technology perspective is that today, because of technology, in each of those strands, you can have multiple channels along different wavelengths of light. So you can have a channel at one wavelength, and they talk about wavelengths in terms of colors. When you look at light, it's the different colors are different wavelengths. So you can have a green channel and a blue channel and a blue-green channel and a orange channel. And anyway, so you can have hundreds of channels as well within one strand. And then each of those channels can have enormous amounts of data go through them. So already you can see that by building this infrastructure, you are laying in place the capacity for future increases that doesn't require any new investment in terms of the fiber. So unlike your water system, if you wanted to add capacity to your water system, you had 100 more houses, you're going to either have to build a second pipe or you're going to have to build a bigger pipe and all the work that involves. For this, with fiber optic strands, you just swap the boxes on either end of that fiber, and now you can increase the capacity by 10-fold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, wherever the technology goes. So you'll hear me say later that it's future-proof. It's a telecommunications infrastructure that's future-proof in that there will never be a limit on how much data you can push through that piece of glass. And that is not true for wireless, and that's not true for copper. That's why most advanced fiber optic or advanced communications infrastructure has fiber as its main part of it. So the rest of the infrastructure are the conduits. These are the pipes under the ground where you pull the fiber through, or the little boxes where the fiber connects to a piece of equipment that goes out to a house or a building. Those are called enclosures and handholds. So that's all of that together are what are called the dark elements of a network, because they don't need any power. They don't do anything other than just sit there. The rest of it, the network equipment, the software, and the technicians, those are what are called the lit elements, meaning they need electricity and they're pushing photons back and forth to do the actual communication. So right there's a pretty obvious separation between functional, operational, financial, because the lit elements, that's the technology piece of it. Those change every 3 to 5 years. And so like your computers, they keep getting upgraded, and which is great because now they can do more things, but there's an expense to that. So the lit piece of it is more of an operating expense, whereas the dark elements are more of a capital expense. And you'll see later why that's an important distinction, especially from a municipal perspective. Next. So why do this? I don't have to tell you. You know what having crappy broadband, and people say, maybe you shouldn't use that word crappy, but it's better than the other word that's even more accurate. So like during the pandemic, we all experienced, well, actually we didn't in Westminster because we had good broadband, but people who had to go completely remote, especially if they had to share their internet connection with their kids because they're doing schooling, it was a nightmare. And we had people come up to us, early on in the pandemic when everybody virtualized, and they were like practically weeping saying, you saved us because we were able to do everything from home, and it was never a blip. And that's only going to get worse going forward. Not that we're going to have more pandemics, but because everything's being virtualized, we're not going back. More people are going to be working from home. What you can do online only gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Kids want to stream 3 movies at the same time instead of just 1 movie and a game. So it's just the need for more and more bandwidth is only going to increase. And then, of course, the software companies now have made us all go to the cloud. You don't buy a disc anymore and put it on your computer. You have to subscribe. And the bigger those programs get, and the more you want them to do, the better your connection has to be, or else your experience with that is miserable. These good broadband is essential for a healthy local economy, whether it's just purely from a quality of life perspective, or your business depends on it. And I'll tell you an anecdote from early on when we were doing our research in Westminster. A local business told us, we did a survey of the residents and the local businesses to see, do people want this? And the overwhelming answer was yes. And this one business told us a story about having a client out in the Midwest that they had a big project for, and it was a couple gigs of this file, the thing that they had done. And so they were paying for the premium service from our local ISP, and they kept trying to send this file, and the connection kept timing out because it was too big. And it would go, and it'd try again, and it would go, and then it would stop, and go, and it'd stop. So they finally had to put it on a USB, external drive, and mail it, overnight it to Chicago. And now granted that was in 2014, but still, it was a business critical situation that had they had a decent internet connection, they wouldn't have had to go through all that other stuff. So it's essential. The other really important piece of this is the reason we collectively, you guys certainly, you suffer from having inadequate service is because the people, don't own any of this stuff. Even though it's all in our public rights of way, the monopolies who have been given these franchises, they own everything. And so they call the shots. And they have a lot of regulatory law behind them that gives them all this latitude to kind of do what they want. And I was on the Cable Commission for many, many years, and we fought and fought and fought trying to get better service, more people connected, and it was pulling teeth, and we rarely won. We did win some things, but the game is stacked against local governments, against the individual consumer, and very much in favor of the local monopolies. So by owning your own infrastructure, now a local government has all the power because you own that infrastructure. You are the landlord. You set the terms. And if the service provider on your property, which is the fiber, isn't doing what you want, kick them out, get another one. If you want that, but you have that choice. You have that power. As I said, we worked with the Cable Commission for years and years. You will die before their service improves. It's just the nature of their business and how the great deal that they have. But the other piece that sometimes people forget about is, and I'm going to we up with you guys, even though I'm not an elected official anymore. I still think of myself as an elected official. We buy a lot of stuff. We invest a lot of money in stuff. Like, for example, roads. Do you guys pay for roads here? Yeah. All right. So every year you're dumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into paving roads. And a road will last you hopefully 20 years. And then you dump another couple $100,000 into that road. And you're just paving roads, paving roads, paving roads. Why do we do that? Well, it's for the local economy. If you have crap roads, it's going to affect property values. It's going to affect your economic development efforts. So we make that investment every year, not expecting a dime back. We don't charge tolls or anything like that. We don't charge a surcharge. It's all from the property taxes and the money we get from other places, but whatever. But we do that because it's good for the community. Well, fiber is like that, except it will generate a return. And unlike roads, once you build that fiber, the useful life of that fiber, right now, The industry says, 70 years. And the only reason they say that is because the first fiber optic cables were laid in the 60s and 70s. Remember the Sprint ads? Oh, I guess got some, they dropped the pin and it, fiber optic connection. So those were the first nationwide fiber optic networks. They're still in use, because it's glass. Nothing happens to glass. It doesn't rust. It doesn't melt. I mean, unless it burns. But the biggest hazard for fiber optic cables is squirrels. The companies that make it, Corning and those guys, have found that some of the coatings, for some reason, it just drives squirrels crazy, and then people knocking out a telephone pole and knocking it down, or somebody putting a backhoe through it, and that happens all the time. But it's real easy to splice it back together, and you're back in business. So it's a long-lived asset that can be financially self-sustaining. Next. Who's got the...
Carries
there
it.
we go. So how do we do this? How could you do it? So what we discovered in Westminster is that there's actually this whole spectrum of business models for how this could happen. So there are very small municipalities, actually very similar size to Sykesville, who went ahead and built the fiber themselves. They bought the boxes. They hired some IT guys, and they run their own little municipal ISP. They're if you want to look it up, it's a little town called Sandy, Oregon, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And they've been wildly successful. And they actually charge less for their service than we're paying from Ting up in Westminster. And it's because it's a public service. They don't have to make money. They just need to break even on their investment. And they've been wildly successful. So that's the sort of the municipal ISP model. And then way out on the other end is what you call a franchise model, where say in Kansas City, Google came in and Google built a fiber optic network, and Google runs it. Google hires the people, and they just pay. Well, actually, I don't even know if they pay Kansas City anything, because Kansas City wanted them there. But anyway, you're basically replacing one monopoly with another monopoly. So in Westminster, we didn't want the local ISP model. We didn't feel like we had the capacity to do that, and we certainly didn't want to replicate another monopoly. So we were looking for a middle way, and the middle way we settled on was we would build the infrastructure, the dark elements of the network, and then we would lease it to a private provider who would then provide the service. And that's how we ended up with our relationship with Ting. So that's a classic public-private partnership. There's lots of other examples of successful public-private partnerships. It's a very popular model for building expensive infrastructure. For a municipality like Sykesville, there's lots of grant funding. That's what sort of sparked this whole conversation, because Mayor Link and Councilman Dyer and I were on this call with Brooke Learman, who's a delegate and running for comptroller, and some other folks. And there's just a pile of money out there right now for building fiber. And the state, Governor Hogan's done a great job. He created a broadband office of broadband, and there's a gentleman there whose name I'm blanking on at the moment. But anyway, he's been shoveling out money. He gave some money to Westminster. He's given some money out in other parts of the state, specifically to build broadband infrastructure. So the money is there. It takes a little work to get it, but it's certainly possible. But then the other thing is, because this is a revenue-generating asset that's easy to finance, we were shocked up in Westminster how eager the banks were to lend us money when we floated this thing. And we ended up getting a really fantastic deal. We put this proposal together, put it out there, and SunTrust was the bank that we went with initially, and they gave us fantastic terms. It was ridiculous. But it was a sign that they understand this. They understand that this is not, even though it sounds like, ooh, this is so risky, it's technology. It's really not. It's easy from the financial perspective, because it's a valuable asset that isn't going anywhere. And then the revenue can defray or completely cover the construction and maintenance. And then there's also the opportunity, because now Westminster has done this and has now a growing body of expertise. You are a sister municipality here. there's certainly the possibility that there could be some sharing of that expertise and maybe even some sort of collaboration. So, but I make no, I don't work for the city anymore, so I can't make any promises or anything, but it's certainly possible that could be something. Okay, next. So why do this? What are the pros? So local control, I mentioned. Absolutely, you can get better services at lower prices for your citizens. Back when we were doing this, all the naysayers were saying, "Oh, this is unproven, too risky, too dangerous." Obviously, that's not true. Our project is very successful. It's on track. We're hitting all our financial and operational milestones. And by the way, so when we put this together, we exhaustively, modeled it out and produced a very detailed business plan. Some elements of which were speculative. We hadn't done it before. We didn't know for sure how it was all going to play out. But we made a lot of very cautious, conservative assumptions. And we projected that we would break even on the debt service. So right now, all of the bonding, right now the debt service is $960,000 a year. And so we projected that we would break even on that within 7 to 12 years after the project was complete. Because it takes a while to build up the subscriber base and generate the revenues. So that's 7 to 12 years that the general fund is subsidizing the fiber fund, which is, we set it up as an enterprise fund. And we are ahead of schedule to do that. So right now, the fiber project generates around $700,000 a year in revenue. So we're only 200 and some change away from that break-even point, which if they continue on the current trajectory of subscriber growth, they'll hit that sometime in the next 2 years. So that's right on the money, like what's on the early side of that projection. So bottom line is, we've done it, it works, and there's no reason that you guys couldn't replicate that success. It is probably the most valuable thing that you can invest your public dollars in terms of return on investment for your taxpayers. It's unlike the roads, which you're going to have to replace in 20 years. You'll only have to do little repairs to this fiber, but it'll be around, again, long after we're all dead. That fiber will still be there generating revenue and being the foundation for outstanding broadband services for the community. It's, obviously it's an investment in the future of the community. And as I mentioned before, there's abundant outside funding available. And the finances of this get real easy when people give you money. So if it's not a loan and it's a grant, that changes the math on your break-even points considerably. So next. So why not do it? It's hard. So I'm not going to tell you, walk in the park. This is a lot of work, and especially for a smaller municipality, it's going to take a considerable amount of effort to get this done, and you're going to need outside help, which will have a cost to it. But no way around it. It's just hard. The other thing is, because it takes so long to plan and build, and then also gradually build those customers up, you really need to have consistent vision and leadership for 10 years, which in our world today, we stumble from election to election hoping there isn't some kind of crisis, and that's hard. And even in Westminster, there was a period of time where the political leadership on this project wobbled quite a bit, and it was a little unnerving. And today I think it's stabilized a little bit, but it's not the same, But the project is mature enough and it has enough momentum that it would take a lot of effort to kill it at this point, because so many people love it so much, and it's making money, and it's hard to kill things that make money. It's complicated, and the complicated part of it is not the technology. The complicated part is the engineering, the rights of way. Where do you go on the pole? When do you go underground? Negotiating those access rights, negotiating your agreement with your provider. It's all that crap. The technology piece of it's easy, especially when you are partnering with a private company to provide the services. They take care of all the technology stuff. But the complicated part is also stuff that's already in our wheelhouse as a municipality. We do these things. We talk about rights of way and negotiating these things. So it's not inconceivable. And it's expensive. You know, doing that work, the fiber itself is not terribly expensive. It's the labor, it's the trenching, it's the pole attachments, it's, you know, negotiating those agreements. That's the expensive stuff. Next. So, in conclusion, in the 21st century, this broadband infrastructure is essential for communities. And, you know, some communities are way ahead, some are lagging way behind. And the other thing that just to keep in mind that, you know, there's reasons for why many communities lag. And it's not just because of the evil monopolies. You know, we have all these competing priorities, right? We have all this other infrastructure that needs, you know, upgrading and rebuilding and repair. We have, or some municipalities have unfunded, you know, retirement obligations. And limited borrowing capacity. You know, depending on your finances, depending on what your revenue streams are, you may not be able to borrow what you need to do this stuff. So there are lots of good reasons why this is taking so long, and maybe some of that applies to you guys. I don't know your situation in detail, but again, there's solutions to all those things. Local governments do infrastructure, and this is infrastructure. It's not technology, it's infrastructure. So it certainly fits in the portfolio of responsibilities for local government. Like, as I said, there are viable models to do this successfully. But the key question is that you guys have to decide and then stick with and execute on. Is this a priority for your community? And, you know, I can't answer that for you. You have to answer that question. So I think that's it. Next. Yep. Questions?
So I had a question for you. When you built it out in Westminster, did you build it all out at the same time, or could you?
Yep.
You built it out in pieces?
In phases, yeah. So we chopped it up. We did a pilot project, and interestingly, I would love to say that we planned it this way, but we didn't. Our city manager at the time, which was a really important variable in all this, that she was, I'll say, aggressive, forward-thinking, forward-leaning, and not shy about being innovative about finding money. And so we had, Alyssa's like, I didn't have anything to do with it. No.
Actually, I did not.
So we had a pot of money that was the capital benefit assessment money. And that capital benefit assessment money, as you know, if you guys have that, it's for improvements. It's for public improvements. And so she decided that this is a public improvement. And so we took a chunk of that capital benefit assessment money, the cash that we had in hand, and did this little pilot project out of the airport and down near Carroll Lutheran Village. And even before we had that lit, that's when we started our conversations with Ting. And by having that fiber in hand, when we sat down with them, it gave us so much credibility and so much leverage. So that was the pilot project. And then when we mapped out the rest of it, we broke it up into 4 phases. And we said that we weren't going to start the next phase until we hit certain subscriber milestones in the prior phase. And that was the plan. And we started doing it, and Ting started signing people up. And those subscriber acquisition numbers were going up so fast. And the other piece of it is that the builder, the contractors were telling us, hey, if we stop work and then have to start again, there's going to be a demobilization and a mobilization cost. So the combination of the rapid subscriber acquisition and that mobilization, demobilization cost, which we didn't think of up front, made us say, okay, we're just going to plow right through. But it still worked well in terms of slowly rolling out across the whole city and then tracking the numbers from phase to phase. So we started construction in 2016 and we finished in 2019. So, you know, right on what we scheduled with what we planned. And like I said, the subscriber number growth has been what we expected.
So then one other follow-up, you know, Sykesville's just a little smaller than Westminster. And is there any literature out there or anything that's out there that says, okay, you need to have, I don't know, 500 subscribers to make this viable or 1,000 or some
Yep.
kind of plateau number?
Right. So there isn't a literature that speaks directly to
Yeah.
that, but I can tell you that we certainly, so our goal was to have multiple providers on our network. And what we found is that we have about 6,000 what we call past premises that are probably maybe about 7,000 potential customers. And, depending on what assumptions you make about what percentage of those that one provider can get, then you start talking about a much smaller pool for a second provider. And then at what point do those two providers start cannibalizing each other? And, so by yourself, you're probably not viable for one provider to come in and just do Sykesville. That's why collaborating with Westminster would make a lot of sense, because then you just become an extension of the Westminster market. And, again, making a whole bunch of assumptions, that would be a very viable way to solve that problem. Not to say it's impossible. I mean, there's probably some providers out there that wouldn't mind taking a crack at this community, because really the key variable, and again, one that we didn't explore as aggressively as we should have in retrospect, are your demographics. What's the median income level? How is that distributed across your community? And because that's what's going to drive your take rate. And the take rate is ultimately what drives the financial success of the project. But my sense is you guys have a pretty decent median income here. You're a pretty affluent little community.
Yep.
So I think you will be fine in that regard.
Thank you.
Yep.
So,
Good question, Jeremiah. Thanks. Good question. Thanks.
Are you running fiber right up to the residents?
Yes. Oh, great question. So I didn't get into all the details.
That's okay. I just because you
So-
got to keep the speed up, right?
So yes, fiber all the way to the premise, and so you've got this little box in there with a piece of fiber comes into your house, and it's bam, it's right there. So the attenuation of the signal is. And the other thing is, again, because of we control it and we built it, we just built the network so that every home. You get your internet connection is a dedicated symmetric connection. And the symmetric part, that's a function of Ting's equipment. The dedicated, though, that's because the city builds the fiber all the way to your house.
Okay.
So you're not sharing it. That's why your service with the cable provider is so inadequate, because you're sharing it with 100 other homes that you're all on the same little box up on the pole. So at 3 o'clock, all the kids come home. It slows down.
The lights go dim.
Yeah.
Tell them what you're normally getting at the door.
So from the wall, I pay for a gigabit, but Ting's very upfront. They said, we call it a gigabit, you're not going to get a gigabit. It's about 800 megs at the wall. But then it starts dropping fast because I live in an old house. And so initially their router just wasn't up to the task of getting, because everything's wireless.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get through those thick plaster walls. And I'm sure you probably have similar housing here.
This house.
Yeah, right. So then you have to get a mesh, wider wireless network, and that works great. Yeah, there you go. So so then again, depending on your wireless router, and then also one of the things that people don't think about, it's your card, your
How fast your laptop or your
Yeah,
your
device.
laptop may not be.
what do they call it? It's got three.
The networking card, you mean?
The networking card. Well, not the networking card. It's your wireless card. It's talking to the router. Those come in sizes, and so if your wireless card is under provisioned, then you're just, no matter how fast it is everywhere else, you're going to have a crappy experience on your laptop. So anyway.
Did you have to actually trench it up to the house, or
Depends on the house.
Okay.
Depends on where it is. So sometimes it's aerial off a pole. Sometimes they just trench it right through the yard. And,
Okay.
And everybody's so happy to get it. They don't care where it goes. Every once in a while, you'll get some homeowner like, no, not there. The bulbs are there. Make it go like this and like this. And the guys who go out are like, okay,
And did the Westminster
Public Works?
Did you guys contract out the first laying of the fiber?
Yes.
Okay.
So
there
what
was
happened
no
was
city
initially-
workers doing it.
was.
Well, now it is. So it's a story that has evolved over time.
Okay.
Initially, it was all contractors.
Okay.
And I'll, in all candor here, one of your obstacles is going to be city staff. Because they're going to go, you want to do what? We don't do that.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and so it took a while. It took a while to kind of push through that skepticism. But once they did, they started going, whoa, wait a second. So, as public employees will do, they're like, I could hire a couple more guys here. I could, and it's true, because there's more work, and now it's generating revenue. And believe me, I know that everybody's got their eye on that 700,000, and once it goes over 900 and it's now generating excess money, who's going to get a crack at that? Believe me. Anyway, so as our public works guys got more experience working alongside the contractors, they started realizing we can do this. Like that trenching equipment, we already use that trenching equipment for the water stuff. And this splicing, it's kind of delicate work, but we do that. This is stuff we can do. So the bottom line is today we've got two FTEs that do nothing but fiber, and they now do the installs. So the backbone all through the community is built, and now when Ting signs up a new customer, it's a two-step process. The city guys will go out and do the drop. They'll install from the street to the house, and then Ting comes behind them and they install their equipment. It's about a 2-week process. And that's all city staff, and they are also now adept at putting in larger conduit and doing larger splices. So when I mentioned before the possibility of collaboration, that's the expertise that you may be able to avail yourselves of. But again, I make no representations. I'm saying what's possible.
All right. Thank you very much for your information.
Yeah.
Greatly appreciate it.
Anyone else? Go ahead. Yeah.
Dr. Wack, so you don't bring the wire to the house unless the customer signs up.
Correct.
So it's the main line in the road.
Yep.
And then once they sign up, then you bring it to their house.
Right. That's not how we started, but that's how it is now.
Okay.
Initially, we were thinking, let's just put the drops in for anybody that says they want to drop. But then we realized, we're spending money and there's no guarantee of revenue on that, so why are we doing that? So we stopped doing that, and it's just when they sign up for service. And it took a while to work that system out with Ting, but that's how it is today.
And you started in 16 and you completed in 19 all the hard
Am I right
wiring.
about that also? I think we finished construction in 19, or if it was certainly pre-COVID.
That's
Yeah,
what
it
I was
definitely
gonna
was
say.
19. It was definitely 19 because everything was done when COVID started. So it was definitely 19. Yeah, so it was like 3.5 years it took to build out the
3.5
whole
years
city.
to drop all the lines in Westminster, and you had mentioned that you went all the way out to the airport.
Yep.
And it's all through the city, Westminster City.
Well, if you look at the Westminster map, it's all like but yeah, and the interesting thing is, there's anybody from the county here? No, everybody can keep a secret. They know that. So early on, we realized that the most efficient design for this was going to have to cross in and out of the county, just like all our roads. You drive on 140, you're in the city, you're out of the city, you're in the city, you're out of the city. So there are stretches of it that go out of the city and cross through the county. And so we negotiated a right-of-way agreement with the county that basically said, hey, we can extend this fiber to anywhere we need to service the city, and the county basically gave us carte blanche on these rights-of-way. So why was I bringing that up? Oh, because you asked about how
long it took and if you did it within the city limits.
Yeah. So it is within the city limits, but it's also outside the city limits, which is an interesting challenge, opportunity that the city has now is there are people just outside the city limits that want the service. And the stumbling block is how to pay for it. And so anyway.
I was just impressed, 3.5 years to drop the lines.
Yeah, because it's, like I said, once you get all the planning out of the way, the actual construction of it's not that hard. It's the key thing around here is rocks in the ground. When you're doing any kind of boring or trenching and you hit like, oh, look, more rocks, it gets expensive and slows things down. But we were really lucky. It happened a couple times, but nothing that was a major challenge to the project.
Thanks everyone for your thoughtful comments. Mark, are you?
Oh, I'm
Chopping
loving
it.
every minute. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for this
Sure.
wonderful presentation. What our hope was to stimulate interest, and we could have a discussion among ourselves. Obviously, you know how I feel about it, but that's what this is all designed to do. And thank you very much for coming by.
Sure, and happy to follow up or meet with you guys again, whatever. You know, as you can imagine, I'm a fan, so I'd love to see you guys do this.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
very
White.
much.
Appreciate your time.
All right,
Thank
Joining
take
you.
care.
us this evening for prepping for.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next order of business happens to be unfinished business. It is to consider, discuss, act on ordinance number 2022-03, zoning text amendment, planned employment center district. So Joe, I know that the staff report is succinctly detailed, but this has been a very intense deliberative process that's been quite involved. If you would like to hit some high points for us and include any recent updates for the public.
Absolutely. So again, this was a continuation of basically the item that was scheduled for our May 9th meeting. We did table it at the request of the state so that a meeting could be held between the Warfield team, state, and of course us. That meeting was held on June 9th. Lots of information came out of that meeting. We did discuss in detail some of the low-income housing tax credit programs and how it was going to be used as part of the Warfield project. We discussed the catalytic revitalization tax credit, and at least in my opinion, the most productive part was discussing the escrow arrangements or the escrow agreements that the town currently has with the Warfield project, and how potentially those escrows could be changed or tweaked so that an influx of money could be used sooner rather than later over at Warfield. We did talk obviously about the pending zoning amendment. One of the things that the town requested during that meeting was that the pending request actually be withdrawn so that there could be meetings held between the town and the applicant so that we could develop a let's just call it a more agreeable text amendment or potentially even a new zone for Warfield that everybody could get behind, and then we could start this process again. So after that meeting, obviously there was no immediate discussion between just the town and the applicants up until just this past Friday, but on June 15th we did receive a revision to the text amendment. This revision was not done with any town input. However, it was made clear to us that, or at least staff, that the reason they were submitting it was because this was the information they intended to talk about during the I guess let's call it the three-way meeting that happened on the 9th, but never had an opportunity to actually do that. So at least in our initial review of it, there are certainly some improvements in that it takes away a lot of the conditional uses being transferred to principal permitted uses. However, there were still several other issues that remained, namely the residential density piece and the mix of uses that was going to potentially be there. So really, we are still asking for more meetings to happen between the town and the applicant. However, the current proposal to us seems like a right time to deny that proposal and encourage the applicant to continue these dialogues that we at least started on Friday so that we can have a, let's just call it a more appropriate text amendment that we can move forward with.
I usually jump in first, but I'm going to just announce that at that meeting with the HCD, which actually I'd just like to say a few things about the how we got to that meeting. I know that we had a very long, intense, and very deliberative public conversation, discussion amongst the council as to whether or not to postpone that vote. And I just bring it up again tonight because I want the public to clearly understand that we didn't take that decision lightly, and that I know that the expectation on their part was that we would vote at the meeting following the public hearing. And that decision was really made based on the request coming from the Department of Housing and Community Development Secretary himself. And I believe that the Secretary believed that if we were to hold off on that decision, that we would then be able to have this meeting. And our decision to hold off on voting in May was rooted in that department's expressed belief that the meeting itself would lead to a way forward. That meeting, from the town's perspective, included participation by, of course, town staff and our town attorney, as well as myself and Council President Carter and Councilman Leo Keenan. And I wasn't sure if either of you wanted to provide any further insights to the meeting beyond what was expressed.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, since you were there in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the meeting was helpful, but the overall impression I got from it was that we were going to try to do a collaborative process going forward. And I think that's where we need to go with this.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree. With that said, just a note with zooming in, the audio isn't 100%, so there was bits and pieces that I couldn't hear depending on who was saying it and where the microphone was. So aside from that, yes, the biggest thing that I got out of the meeting was the hopefulness of using the applicant's money forefront to put into the buildings to restore them, and then using the escrow account in diverting it so it's not taxable. I thought that was a very good compromise, a very good bringing forth some type of effort to that. So I appreciate that.
And do we need to expand upon that for the public so that makes more sense to them as far as?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to, because
I
the
am
escrow,
too, but I just want to make sure that
the escrows, the way they're currently structured, is what the town's holding, at least in escrow 1, it has to be specifically used for building renovations. That's how the eligible work is defined within the agreement. However, because of certain tax implications for the applicant, they're reluctant to use that money. Well, the idea would be, well, if there was another investment into the buildings that kind of matched what we're holding in escrow, that escrow money can then be diverted to things that maybe won't have the same kind of tax implication.
Yes, thank you for saying that. That's what I meant.
It's complex, President Carter. It needed to be broke down, I think, for the public. I think everybody at the table understood. So thank you. Okay, so I don't have really much more to say, to be honest. I'd like to be able to say that I left there with the feeling of having some kind of predictable outcome moving forward, but I didn't. So we'll move forward, and hopefully that we can come to some sort of a happy place and something that we can agree to have that path forward that we're all hoping for. Let's see. So at this point, before calling for a motion, I guess I would ask if anyone here at the table has any other questions for staff or for those of us that were at the meeting with the HCD. No?
So I guess I do. In looking at this particular proposal, it seems like the beginning of a negotiation. Is that right? A way of looking at it, this June 15th proposal?
You mean the modification
Yeah.
to the text amendment?
I'm not sure if I'm thinking of this the right way or the wrong way, but essentially it seems like, the applicant's given up a few substantial things in terms of the change, and I'm wondering if I'm looking at that the right way.
I wouldn't call it substantial, personally. I think the two most important, or I should say the two most loudly expressed concerns with respect to the public hearing were rooted in the two remaining big asks and big changes, even in the modified request. And I still believe that those, if taken to a public hearing, would result in the same concerns.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going with the question is in reference to how do we go about the negotiation and how do we go to the collaborative solution? Is that so I know we're not here to talk necessarily in reference to that, but for me, it's part of this overall conversation in what's the step to get there, to where we're actually sitting down with the applicant and working through whatever the desired end is, that's an implementable solution as we move forward.
I think we start with an actual plan presentation, like a presentation by the applicant, by the developers, of a plan, a real world picture of what a redevelopment of the historic parcel looks like, and let that inform, as well as the vacant parcels, and let that inform a zoning amendment request, and or the development of a new zone altogether.
So, from my perspective, I know the mayor was talking, but
No, that was the
they should be working with us. I don't understand why we're dealing with a zoning ordinance. They could spend 6 months with the planning commission, and this body here can reject what they've done there. So, getting back to what the mayor said, they should be collaborating with us, and we should say, this kind of looks good. Let's see what the planning commission says. Like, the planning commission's a volunteer operation. I mean, they've never done this kind of stuff before.
Well, they're also tasked with comparing apples to,
Yeah.
this looks like this when you compare it to this. It's all very defined. It's pretty regulatory, right? So, again, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's okay. But if we were happy with what they want to do or what kind of plan they would do, then we would tell the planning commission, hey, this is something we would like to do as elected officials. But right now, it seems to me that the zoning text amendment is kind of bypassing us. Like we should be the ones making the decisions. We're held accountable to the voters. That's just my opinion. And I mean, I kind of want to get rid of this document just to start anew.
Yeah.
That's just me. But
Thank you.
Well, and I would say I support that. I mean, I feel like it isn't collaborative, that we haven't done any talking or sitting down at the table, and I've heard really clearly from my neighbors, what they want to see happen and what they don't, and we have a contract. And so starting with the contract and the expectations and, without insinuations that because people want to stay with the contract that somehow we're bad people, I think we have to move past that. I think we have to move to a point of starting with the contract, starting with us, and what we've heard from the community that people want to see there.
I think that's what Councilman Schofield was going for, is what's next?
Yeah, I like the way I'm looking at this. I hear either the town staff are going to sit down and negotiate with the applicant,
It's
or
not a
we're
negotiation.
okay.
It just isn't. The town staff meeting with the developer would not be considered a negotiation. It would be, here's the kind of plan we have in mind. How does that taste? Is this in keeping with the zone to the extent that it would just require an amendment? Or would it require a lot more effort on the part of both parties?
So what I heard Joe say, and maybe I heard it wrong and I'm interpreting wrong, is that you said you would meet with the applicant and you'd come up with a tenable solution for moving forward. To me, that's a negotiation. That's what it is. And so, because they're having to give up some things in order to get to a place where we would be okay. And we would, I don't know if we will or we won't, but in my head, I'm thinking that we might have to too, in order to get to a collaborative solution. And so either the town staff are doing that, or we're doing that. And I know we don't want the planning commission to do it. We've been very clear about the planning commission not having that role, because that's just not what their role is. So I'm back to, do we do a working session if we don't move forward with this document? And I'm not really talking about this document. I'm really talking about what's step A after we make a decision about this. I'd just like to hear some thoughts there.
I'm happy to give my opinion, because again, the whole idea here is if this is pushed aside and denied, then there would be that talk between the applicant and staff so that we could try to figure out as close as possible, given the feedback that I've received throughout this whole process, before we ever come back before council and say, okay, we've worked on it and this is where we got. And whether or not that's agreeable to the council, then eventually you all would have to make that determination and decide whether we want to go down this path again. But again, I think that's really where we go from here, is that the applicant works with staff to try to come up with the best, most equitable solution based on the feedback we've received so far.
And I would throw in too, I mean, I've heard from my neighbors also, and if you looked at the minutes of the meeting from May 3rd, I really appreciate staff putting down, not in favor of the text amendment. There was quite a few of them there, so. And I feel like we have to move on it based on that meeting, and we just have to do something about it. They're gonna be like, why did we have that meeting if we didn't do anything with it? So
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with everybody in reference to the zone text amendment. I'm just wondering what's next.
Joe, I have a question. As it states now, if we vote against this text amendment, the applicant would have to wait at least a year to resubmit, or resubmit a new plan with significant changes. Are we willing, are we saying in public, we're gonna not hold to that, or?
We've been saying that
Yeah.
for a while, that
Okay.
Because it's a text amendment,
Mhm.
not a rezone, that anything they really came back and submitted would be treated like a brand new request and
Okay.
would follow the same process as basically what we followed for this one.
I just want to be clear with that, because in prior meetings, we said that it have to be significant changes. Okay, that's off the table.
Right.
Okay.
So I have a question. We have a contract in place, and so this is happening outside of staying on task with the contract that was initially signed. So why are we continuing to look at text amendments or redoing that versus going back to the original agreement?
Well, the sales contract doesn't control the zoning
Mm-hmm.
for the property. I mean, so there can be two parallel paths for what may or may not have happened as far as complying with the escrow agreements or the preservation agreement. That and the zoning really they're not the same thing. So it's like we can have those conversations in parallel paths.
Because I guess what I've also heard from the public loud and clear is, regardless of what goes in the buildings, that there be an investment in making the buildings ready for whatever's going to go into that, and not seeing that progress.
Right.
And so, as a concern that I've heard is that we're spending too much time focusing on paper and not on action. So,
And again, I think that's where the escrow discussion comes into play, is moving forward with this concept that was discussed at the June 9th meeting with the state, is to say, maybe there is an adjustment that could be made to the escrow that would allow for private investment to happen on the buildings themselves, and then releasing the escrow funds to put those money to use in some beneficial way on the property somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the building.
okay. And in terms of the process piece, is there a place for a group of council members to work with you, with the developers, if there continue to be questions, versus just it all kind of being on you? Or is that
I mean,
I don't know if that's the process,
Yeah.
or if there's an opportunity.
typically, there's always opportunities for council members to participate. However, the minute you all get involved, then it becomes an even more public process to all of that. So again, we can do it publicly. I don't know if that's necessarily the most efficient way to do things, but again, that's always an option.
It has a lot of public interest.
It certainly does. Again, I'm not denying
I think
that.
the
That's
more
true.
transparent we can be, the better, so people understand. Because I think there's always been a lot of questions of what's going on there, why is it, and I think maybe it's time to move to a transparent.
Yeah, I
process.
have to echo Councilman Garoff's takeaways from the public hearing with respect to the public wanting to see, and I feel this way as well, the public wanting to see and invest a tangible, I can put my eyes on that and I see a difference in the stabilization of the buildings. And that has moved to the forefront very evidently by most of the public and I and myself, and Council President's shaking her head. And that's why, that is where this idea with respect to the escrow release, I would make sure that the public and anyone that wasn't at that meeting understands that I have no intentions of releasing $2.1 million from an escrow for infrastructure until that amount is invested on the front end by the property owners in the stabilization of the buildings. It needs to go right into the buildings so everybody can begin to have faith that this process can move forward.
I think it would be helpful to have a routine report out on progress. Roger mentioned something in the meeting in reference to how much he's invested already. And I don't know if the applicant would be open to working with us to make some of the information public that could be made public. But if you're going to be working with the applicant to move forward, presuming, we move forward from here, then some sort of a report out as part of your staff report would be, I think it would be a helpful thing for the public to be able to kind of watch as we're starting to make some progress on this.
Well, and Jeremiah, any money that's been invested into the stabilization of the buildings or any improvements to the buildings that have come out of the said escrows is reported to us because that money has to be dispersed with receipts to that work. So we're very aware of, to the dollar amount, what has been invested in sticks and bricks versus what's been invested in soft costs with respect to at least what's come from the disbursement of the escrows. But I do think it's important for not only this body but the public to be aware of those numbers up to this point and then also moving forward. I think that's a great idea.
So I'm all about the public knowing what's going on, and openness is wonderful. But the problem I see is if we start attending too many meetings, there's always the fear of, oh, well, we have quorum. We have to trust staff to do what we hired them to do, and then report back to us and everyone else what's going on. But, if you put too many elephants on the bridge, it collapses. We, being elected officials, have our own little gravitational field, and I don't want to mess up the orbit they're trying to establish here. Am I wrong? If we start, too many of us elected officials start showing up and we cannot resist the urge to open our mouths, because I am guilty of that, we start running into trouble, do we not?
Yes, you will need to be careful about turning conversations into meetings that are required to be open.
Me being at home means I won't ask those inevitable questions that I will ask you personally rather than in a group and cause trouble.
So just to clarify what I was saying before, I think what I was saying is that during your staff reports that you report at council, that you would be sharing out how the progress was going so that everyone would know.
Yeah.
Just want to be super clear on what
Thought
I
you
was.
meant that. Yeah,
That's how I
that's
know.
what I thought you meant.
So clear.
Great. Any other thoughtful comments from the council? Okay. Hearing no more of those thoughtful comments, do I have a motion to act upon the ordinance?
Yes, since the zoning text amendment was not withdrawn, I will make the motion to deny the adoption of ordinance 2022-03 as presented along with revisions, but at the same time encouraging the applicant to continue to work with town staff to develop a new proposal.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's made by Councilman Keenan and seconded by Council President Carter. Before calling for a vote, I'll repeat the motion and ask if there are any more reasons to deliberate further. The motion is to deny the adoption of ordinance 2022-03 as presented along with the recently received revisions and encourage the applicant to continue working with town staff to develop a new proposal. Any other comments? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Looks unanimous. Any opposed? Thank you. So the ordinance passes unanimous. The motion passes unanimously, and that's saying so. Ordinance number 2022-03, zoning text amendment, Plan Employment Center District is not adopted. Thank you. Good night. Second item of unfinished business is a public hearing and consider, discuss, act on ordinance number 2022-04, budget amendments. The ordinance was introduced at our May 23rd meeting, but a brief recap is in order, I'm sure. I'll just say that this is a customary step with respect to any budget, any current budget. As we approach the end of the fiscal year, several budget categories need to be adjusted to properly account for current and expected revenues and expenses for the remainder of the fiscal year 2022. This document includes an overall increase in spending of $122,147, largely due to an increase in grant reimbursements, which is nice, and higher than anticipated impact fee receipts. I'll let Joe offer some additional insights before we open the public hearing.
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. There were no changes between the introduction and proposed adoption tonight. Again, this is a customary budget revision right before the end of the fiscal year.
Excellent. So do I have a motion to open the public hearing for ordinance number 2022-04, budget amendments?
So moved.
All right, thank you,
Second.
Councilman Grassley, and seconded by Councilman Schofield. All in favor of opening this public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
And that's a unanimous. So we are now opening the public hearing for ordinance number 2022-04, budget amendments, precisely at 8:06 p.m.
Motion to close.
I assume because there's no public comments. I must
22.
ask.
We have one resident here who must be here to get input on the budget.
Motion to
provisions.
close
No?
the public
No?
hearing.
Councilman Grassley makes a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have a second?
Se-
Councilman Schofield may have that. The public hearing is now closed at 8:06 and 39 seconds.
Motion to approve. Motion to approve budget amendment
We
22.
have to say aye.
No, we already,
Oh,
we all did, yeah. The hands went up. Does the council have any questions for staff at this point for the budget amendments? Okay, go for it, Councilman Grassley.
Motion to approve budget ordinance 2022-04.
You got it. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Council President Carter. Motion made by Councilman Grassley for the record. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so now we have ordinance number 2022-04, budget amendments. Accepted.
Just one comment.
Oh.
Craig,
come on.
Craig has done a great job. I just want to say he's just done absolutely phenomenal.
He is on a well-deserved vacation. That's why.
Good for him.
Who is?
Craig.
Oh, Craig, yes. I thought you said the mayor, and then you said, I'm sorry. All right, so that brings us to new business, which is, I think, just to one item of new business. Consider, discuss, act on resolution number 2022-04, Sustainable Maryland Municipal Certification Program. I'll give you a little background on this one. Sustainable Maryland is a certification program for municipalities in Maryland that want to promote sustainability, save money, and take steps to maintain their quality of life over the long term. Sustainable Maryland is a collaborative effort between the Environmental Finance Center at the University of Maryland and the Maryland Municipal League, to which we all belong. Becoming a Sustainable Maryland certified community is an objective that was discussed during our council strategic planning session on that day when it snowed and iced over and none of us got home safely. And one of the goals in the comprehensive plan's implementation action plan section. Passage of this resolution is required in order for Sykesville to become registered with Sustainable Maryland and begin the certification process. Joe, have I said everything?
Just about. I do want to clarify, this is different than the
That's
Department
right.
of Housing and Community Development program, the Sustainable Communities program. So
Thank you.
this is obviously different than that. We're already a member of the Sustainable Communities program.
That is a very good clarification. Thank you.
This is a new process. So.
This also allows us to be eligible for certain grants that the
Sure.
state has to offer. So it's not just a designation, it opens up doors for funding.
For sure.
Training and resources, that's for sure.
And this is where we're leveraging what the DSC does with that kind of stuff.
Yes, there would likely be a strong partnership
Correct.
With this particular program.
That was a good comment. Thank you, sir. Anything else? Anyone else? No questions for staff, so at this time, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2022-04, allowing for registration with Sustainable Maryland and authorizing our town planner to serve as Sykesville's agent for the Sustainable Maryland Municipal Certification process?
So moved.
There it
Second.
is. You guys are, I feel like I'm playing auctioneer here. Councilman Schofield with the motion and Councilman Keenan with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I didn't see to the right. I assume everybody's hands are up. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so, and no opposed. Wonderful. That means resolution number 2022-04, Sustainable Maryland Municipal Certification Program is unanimously approved. Thank you. That moves us to the announcements and reports section of our agenda. I will look to Joe for, well, first I'll announce our next meeting is, wow, I don't have it here.
July
11th. Thank you. Our next meeting is Monday, July 11th, 2022. We do have volunteer opportunities available on the Historic District Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, Police Auxiliary, and Crossing Guard. Anyone interested in these positions from a volunteer perspective, please email town@sykesville.net for more info.
Crossing guard isn't needed until August.
Well, this is true, but you know, it's time to get your mind right for
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
Because it'll be here before we know it. But that's a very good point. Staff updates.
I'm sorry.
Town Manager Joe.
I actually have no specific updates.
Wonderful. I love that. And a public safety report from our lieutenant.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll be stepping in for the chief today because he is sick at home with COVID.
Oh.
Really? Yeah. The public safety report is going to handle the time period from May 16th through June 12th of 2022. Highlights here of the 959 incidents or call for services that were handled. We handled 31 assist other agencies, 16 community policing initiatives, 95 foot patrols. We had 3 juvenile complaints, 507 patrol checks, 23 special assignments, 41 traffic enforcement initiatives, and then 13 vehicle maintenance incidents, which could be anything from getting a oil changed or washing the cars and otherwise taking care of those. We did have 2 town ordinance violations and 1 noise complaint. Those being the highlights, does anybody have any questions about anything specific?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the noise complaint automobile generated?
Let me look.
Thank you.
If I had to guess, I'd say no.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Good question.
Is there a citation? Was there a citation issued for the noise ordinance?
I'm looking into
Okay,
it now,
sorry.
sir.
That's okay.
I wasn't sure if I missed a
He wanted
question.
a noise complaint, and I wasn't, I'm not sure if it was, I don't believe that was one of the 2 ordinance violations that he mentioned.
Last time I did this, I got really lucky, and I literally just opened right to the page that you were asking me questions about, and then today I was so lucky.
We're here all night, Lieutenant. And if you can't find it, you can get back.
Well, I'll peruse for a minute, and then if I can't find it, I'll research it when I go back to the office.
Sounds good.
While you're looking that up, I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to comment and say that I'm, again, very impressed by all the community policing. It's absolutely wonderful that all that's happening, and I'm noticing
Thank
that
you.
more and more officers are doing it, which is also fantastic, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. We can thank Brad Darby for the majority of those, but now that I'm an office creature, I did venture out, and Jason and I climbed into a sewer grate to locate a young lady's skateboard.
Yes. Yes, you did.
Well, I actually stood here and watched Jason do it because I wasn't there. But it worked out okay.
Oh, management.
That's right.
I was thinking all 3 of you did a hee-ho.
Well, it was a little bit of backbreaking work there to try to get the grade out, and once we did that, Jason was nice enough to volunteer before he got told he needed to go down there. I'll look into that noise ordinance for you and email everybody.
Very good.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Noticed a couple juveniles struggling with some mental health issues.
Yes.
And noted kind of nationally, we're seeing a lot related to the end of the school year. And is there a concern? Are there more needs in the community in that area that are rising up? I know coming out of COVID, we're running into a lot more.
I don't know if it is anything that's new. I think that we just happen to be recurring incidents that we've dealt with in the past, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
We do have some officers here that are CIT and peer support trained. We offer a lot of literature for the
How many are CIT at this point?
myself, Corporal Bird, Sergeant Kirkner,
And Sergeant Bird.
and Sergeant Bird. Sorry, and we're going to look to try to get Officer Young CIT certified, and then I want to say, once the new kids get out, we'll try to look to get them in school too.
So one discussion that I was having recently was related to mental health first aid training.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the current CIT
It is,
curriculum,
yes, ma'am.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is it doing, in the current CIT, is it just the adult version or is it adult and youth?
I don't know if there is a youth version.
There is a youth version.
Okay, I have not partaken in that.
Okay.
The youth part, I get the mental health first aids as part of the CIT
CIT.
certification, but
So in the adult version, you've gone through it.
I have.
It's diagnosis related.
correct.
In the youth version, it's adults talking to youth. That's not diagnosis driven.
Okay.
So one conversation I've started having is, would that be helpful to the officers in what we're seeing to have both, or to have that available also to the public?
I don't think it.
To help your.
I don't think it would hurt. The problem that we have, do we have folks that will give us that curriculum?
So the help that we could look at that.
My question would be, is that a new 40-hour training that we would need to take?
So it's an 8-hour.
Okay. I can
first aid either way is an 8-hour.
I could reach out
Adult or youth.
to the folks that kind of handle that program for the county and see about trying to get.
Or is it the health department that's
It
doing
is,
in
yes.
CIT?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There are others of us who might like to take that to learn more, who don't need it as vital as you do, but still can learn and benefit from it. Myself being one of them.
I happen to know people, so I'll see if I can't make a couple phone calls and see what we can't do to get that done.
Well, the thought was, if there's a community interest, that the council might be able to support,
Sure.
that would help you in policing and in the community policing, just to increase that knowledge, and having gone through the course,
Mhm.
at least on the adult side, if that would be a beneficial, as we're talking about community policing and building a base here to support in that work.
Yes, I will make some phone calls and drop some emails and see what I can find out. The good part of it is we do rely heavily on the behavioral health unit for areas that we'd not be able to cover based on our own experiences or our certifications, and kind of use that as a gateway to get them where they need to go. The beauty of CIT and peer support is I make fill out some forms and send it off, and then they circle the wagons and.
Could you maybe, for those that aren't as familiar with the CIT program
Sure.
and the peer support, just give the council an overview?
Sure. So CIT is crisis intervention training. It's special certifications that officers go through to learn how to deal with folks that have alcohol issues or drug issues or mental health issues, and it teaches a different way to deal with it, because you're not going to arrest your way out of that problem. Speaking of a younger officer that I thought everybody needed to go to jail. And I put a lot of people in jail. But the more mature me and the older me and the less, I don't want to do paperwork me, finds it easier to, instead of taking this person who has a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, which is a sickness, if I can keep them out of jail and send them to services, that's kind of what CIT does. So I can choose to arrest or not. Sometimes you have to, but sometimes I can say, hey, look, I just found a bunch of heroin in your car. If you go to services and get yourself clean, I'll stick this in the property room for a year and a day, and at the end of the year and a day is up, I can't charge you anymore. I can just get rid of it. Properly, of course, if you go get yourself straightened out. And it surprises me, because I'll have people walk up to me all the time and be like, thanks for doing what you do. You saved my daughter, or you kept me out of jail, or whatever. So there's a huge... like a big light bulb went off in my head when I went through this training. I'm like, well, I can not take you to jail. I can get you some help, and hopefully it works. And I've seen that it has. So that's kind of what CIT does. The peer-to-peer support. If you have people that are in this job that have seen things or experienced things that are very traumatic, they pull us together, and we'll go and have a debrief, or just sit there and listen to them as they discuss what they want to discuss, if they want to discuss anything. I was called to Westminster City when they were involved in a shooting on the railroad tracks last year, I guess it was, and just sat in the room and facilitated a conversation that occurred between the other people that were involved and other mental health people. And it's, Vegas rules, no notes are taken, that kind of deal. Just let them talk, and then we push them toward mental health services. And I'll tell everybody that'll listen that I go to therapy, and it's a good thing. You know what I mean? So.
Have you encouraged the younger officers to mature more quickly as you have?
Unfortunately, I'm so old that it's rubbing off, so they don't really have much of a choice. If I can. And it's not the same policing it used to be. We used to be able to take people to jail all the time, and now
We're grateful for your
Generally can't.
wisdom, sir.
Thank you.
And I will say, the lieutenant and I had a conversation before the meeting started tonight about an ongoing issue that's been going on for years with one particular person that he's been working with closely, and I really appreciate it.
It is with that particular residence. Sometimes she really likes me, and other times she doesn't like me a lot. It just all depends on which one you get. But we've had some really difficult conversations in that house. I had to give a notification when her son died, which was very difficult for me, as it was for her. And then this person would call to talk to me specifically because we had that moment, got along for a minute. But I think it's wholeheartedly worth the investment that we put in our officers to learn how to have that alternate approach.
Do you think that this sort of training would be helpful for the community if somehow we were able to work with?
I don't know. I think it would be, to answer your question, yes, but I don't know whether that is a thing.
Well, the mental health first aid is. So for the community, we could offer with probably the health department would make the most sense. They could come in and we can offer the class to local merchants, to local residents, both the adult and the youth version. And I think it makes our community stronger to be able to know how to help someone who's struggling without making it, a criminal case or something else.
Sometimes it has to be criminal. It really does.
Absolutely, and not disagreeing with that, but I think there are a lot, as you were saying, a lot more opportunities to help support our neighbors.
Yeah.
And not rely just on the police to have to be called for everything that either a business owner or a neighbor could.
So this isn't on the agenda, but I wonder if this is something that that council members would support the staff looking into a little bit more, of seeing if we could do this first aid training for the community. Is that something that?
Oh, while we were at the MML, Council Member Guroff convinced me that, like taking a first aid course or a CPR course, it wouldn't hurt for me to learn this. No one's ever said, you know what, unfortunately you knew too much and you solved the problem. So reverse, you should have known about this. And I don't. And I'd be willing to take that class. So if I'm ever walking, remember, I'm home during the day. If I'm walking down in a library and I see something going on, I go, you know what, a year ago I wouldn't know what to do. But thanks to a class, I know that I should do this and then that. I'd love to take the class.
I'll reach out to Veronica at the health department and see what I can find.
The answer from my perspective of your question, Jeremiah, would be yes.
Okay.
I would be interested in that.
So that'd be fantastic if we could figure that out and maybe get a report back out.
Sure. I have some resources about trainers. I actually was going to take it to be able to train it, but my schedule just didn't allow me to be gone for that long. But I'll email her tonight and see what I could come up with as far as the ability to bring that here for both adults and juveniles, and then for them to be able to train you
I have
guys.
some connections as well.
Okay.
I can help them.
We even have a room that can be taught in.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Lieutenant Kilgore, I do.
Yes, ma'am.
On a positive note,
Yay.
I want to say thank you to Officer Revelo with his skills that he was able to be utilized through Westminster
Yes.
Police and also with the Sheriff's Department
Yes.
as a translator.
Yes.
So that's another good asset to have in our community.
Very much so.
I'm shocked they don't have a Spanish speaking.
They generally do. It's just probably not on the shift.
Okay.
I've actually have used them a couple times for Spanish, but I think he's in a unit that's not necessarily working the road as often.
Okay.
But I will let him know.
Yeah, thanks for that shout out. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. Love the diversity in our police
Yes.
department.
Yes.
God bless. Thank you, Lieutenant Kilgore.
My pleasure, ma'am.
All right. That brings us to council committee reports. Mark, I'm going to start on my left. I don't believe that you would probably have anything to add after Dr. Wacker is here about Comcast and
Believe it or not, I do.
Okay, let's hear it.
Only that Shop HQ will be terminated as of July 12th, and I will give to Joe. Xfinity has a website where you can look at upcoming changes. So if you're buying blankets with sleeves in them, you won't be able to do that on Shop HQ after July 12th.
You mean the slanket?
Whatever
The
that's
trademark
called.
slanket?
Slanket?
Sleeve, slanket?
Well, I know these channels exist, but I know nothing of them. And every time I tune in, it's like, why would anybody buy that? But clearly people do.
So Shop HQ gone.
Shop HQ's gone as of the 12th.
Thank you.
That's all.
Schofield.
There was no planning commission meeting on June 6th. The next one is scheduled for July 5th at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
HDC. Yes, HDC,
correct.
yes. All these acronyms, oh my gosh. Historic District Commission is supposed to be meeting on Tuesday the 28th, but there has been no applications and no meeting is planned. Carrie?
I'll check on that.
Okay.
No?
Nope,
We do.
Yeah.
we do,
Yeah.
okay. So there will be an HDC meeting on Tuesday, 7 o'clock here, and we also will provide that via Zoom. And then we also received notification that our long-term chairperson, Norman Falb, is going to be stepping down as chair. He will be continuing as a member, but we will feel his presence gone, but he'll still be with us, which is a good thing.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that update, Council President Carter. I turn to you, Councilwoman Gurrock, regarding
Spark.
Yes.
So there's a meeting this Thursday in the park,
In the park.
How apropos.
following a porch talk at the Sykesville Museum. So definitely encourage the Gatehouse Museum. Thank you.
It's not
Definitely.
gonna be here.
Oh, it's here.
So
It's
they can-
moved?
So they can broadcast.
Okay, that was my question. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So the talk hasn't been moved, just the meeting.
The porch talk is here as well.
The porch talk will be here as well. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. So
The meeting's at the park. The porch talk is here.
Trading places. It's called Trading Spaces. Sykesville version.
very confusing,
All right.
but we'll be somewhere having a meeting.
And you'll be late.
I'll probably be late, especially if it's at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Sorry about that.
You're good. You're good. That's what happens when you work long hours. Which you might not know about yet, but.
Sick person.
Work.
So we have on July 2nd, the 4th of July parade down Main Street. First movie in the park was a wonderful success. The water feature at Sykesville's Park of Miller Cooper Park is, I don't even.
A big splash. It's making a big splash.
It's never empty.
That's true.
There's
Except
never,
Tuesdays.
except Tuesdays when it's closed. But when the water's flowing, there are always children, and as you mentioned, any age is welcome.
Please, yes.
There's
I'd love
not
to
a-
see more teenagers enjoying the water features, as you
And I
put
think
it.
now that school's out, we might
Yeah.
during the week, and so so things are going really, really well. And then the music will happen towards the end of the year, or the end of the
End of
summer,
summer.
excuse me.
Sure. Thank you. And Councilman Grassley, you're up.
I kind of want to talk to Joe a little bit and staff about the size of signs in downtown Sykesville and campaign signs. And I believe there currently is not an ordinance for that. Is there any sign ordinance that is in the bylaws at this current position point?
There's nothing specifically that regulates campaign signs and the size of those campaign signs. As a matter of fact, because Councilman Grassley gave me a heads up that this was going to be happening tonight, one of the things that the town attorney and I have discussed before has been that our sign ordinance is in fact likely very much out of date and probably could use a little bit of tweaking to bring it up into more modern standards. So when we do that, we can absolutely look at signage or size requirements within the historic district and all over town.
For
So I guess
For
I was
signs
wondering-
in general, you can't regulate speech, so you can't impose,
No, I was just talking about the size.
right, but not just for campaign signs,
Right.
just in general.
So you mean if I have like a fort's battle flag that's, 80 feet by 100 feet, that's okay.
Flag different.
You could have a regulation that said you can't have signs or flags or whatever that are that big, but you couldn't have a regulation that said you can have commercial signs, but you can't have vote for Joe signs.
Oh, no, I don't want any sign that big.
Right,
So-
that you,
Yeah. So, Joe, I just want to get this on the agenda for next month.
Right.
So that
No,
we
I
can talk
agree.
about it. I mean, there's a little bit of a, I wouldn't say loophole, but it's convoluted what's in there right now. And I think it needs to be clear and concise. If people don't like it, I get it on the agenda for next month so everybody knows we talk about it.
I'd actually like to discuss the idea that yard signs are littering and cluttering up our town, and I'm over it. But that would be maybe an additional conversation or a separate one, I'm not sure.
That would
But-
be a
That would
free
be an
speech.
additional conversation.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it sounds like if we can't, some of that we might not be able to control versus the size,
But
right?
we would have to eliminate the ability for any yard signs
For
at all.
anything.
Yeah.
Just the size. I'm just talking about the size.
I
That's
agree.
all I'm talking about. Just to clarify
Al's very,
Is-
very
Al's
concerned
concerned
about
about
the
size.
the size. I just don't, I think they're just, they don't need to be that big in the downtown area, that's all.
Thanks for bringing that
The
up.
roof of
and,
the Astrodome does not need to be displayed.
And as I mentioned to Al earlier this week when we discussed this, it's already apparent that, or I assume there is support that is something we'd like to have moved to an agenda item.
Sure.
Correct?
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Al.
You're old?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilman Grassley.
No, that's,
Very good. Councilman Keenan.
Okay, downtown Sykesville connection. In each of your mailboxes here, you should have the Sykesville Snallygaster,
Yes.
one for each of you. Roderick Sykes. These are now available for sale for $10 a piece at the post office, but you all each have one in your mailbox. Thank you. They're already a huge hit. Roderick Sykes was apparently the first journalist who ever mentioned the Sykesville Snallygaster, so
That's
that's why
fantastic.
his name.
I'm going to call him Roddy Rob.
Roddy. And also in your mailboxes and for sale at the post office, you will have a pack of Sykesville postcards with beautiful pictures of Sykesville. They're for sale. The pack, I think, is $5 at the post office or 50 cents a piece. These are very,
they look very nice.
yeah.
And I think that was the design committee's efforts, Fruits, right?
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Who was the amazing photographer that did that? Accolades to him.
Lynn Chavez, I think is her name.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, she posts I'm not supposed to be talking.
No,
Well, you
go
were
ahead, go
asking
ahead.
questions.
I was at, you were asking questions.
Okay, she posts a lot of her photographs on, I think, Sykesville Online and, other places on Facebook that I'm not a part of, but I've heard that. She does some really beautiful work.
Yes. I'm just seeing them afar and I'm like, they're beautiful, full of color.
Yeah, they're actually beautiful pictures. Yep.
I handed mine out at the MML conference in Ocean City
say,
instead of business cards. So, and I told everyone they need to send it to someone who lives far enough away to come to Sykesville where they otherwise wouldn't. And spend their money.
Is her name on the back?
No, is it on the back? No.
I want to make sure I didn't get
Oh, it does say, yes.
Did
Yeah,
I
it's
say
a-
her name right?
Yep, art by Salem Chavez.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything
Thank you
else,
for the
Councilman?
update.
No, we had our board meeting last night. It was the end of the fiscal year, so we've had some board members leaving, but we elected 2 new board members, Julia Cooper and Matthew White.
Oh, lovely.
And then went through our normal board approval process of some compensation policy, edited bylaws, and things like that. Farmers Market is doing very well. Pride event, I understand, was very well attended. I wish I could have been there. But for some reason, the weather just seems to work out perfectly almost every Sunday so far, so that's good.
When is the golf tournament this year?
That's a good question. I don't have that on my agenda. But
August 1st.
August 1st.
Lieutenant says.
Oh, wait a minute.
August 1st?
No.
No, that's a different one.
no, we do have Sippin' on Summer coming up
Lieutenant
on
is,
July
cheating
30th.
on the DSC.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think that's
There
what
was
it
a
is.
move.
12th sounds right.
I'm actually out of town that.
August 12th?
Hang on.
The farmer's market is so well attended that my husband he's an avid. He has to go at 8:45
Mhm.
to get in line for the tacos.
Oh my goodness.
It's a long line.
It's a
August
long
the
line.
11th is the golf tournament.
August
Wait,
11th.
August
Sorry.
11th
It's
is
off by
the
there.
DSC
Golf
golf
tournament.
tournament. Awesome. Thank you.
And we're still looking for some sponsors as well.
Where do we-
Businesses want to sponsor.
Can you mention
You go ahead, Mitch.
okay, the changes going on over the Little Sykes Railroad
Yes,
Park?
absolutely.
Pretty significant.
Yeah, hopefully everybody's driven past Little Sykes lately. The quilt that is on there now is part of the Carroll County Quilts Barn Quilt Trail. We now have that bright quilt there, as well as all the gardening that's going over there, and just fixing it up and making it look much better. It's a lot of volunteers, a lot of work going on over there, but it's beautiful.
And a lot of that was grant funded, I assume?
Yes. Yep.
Healing the Planet is the name of the grant.
Healing the Planet. And we finally got a Carroll County Quilt Trail Quilt Square in Sykesville. Well done to the creative minds at the Downtown Sykesville Connections Design Committee.
Yep.
You
Yes.
don't
beautiful.
need to buy the blanket with the.
Green Committee. Keep Sykesville beautiful.
Committee.
Affiliate, yes.
Come every.
Okay, and Councilwoman
Yes, I have
Garoff
one
has
update
another
on
point.
the youth council. So we sent out the survey, but did not get enough responses kind of for a good round, so we're gonna be sending it out again. So I just wanted to let people know where we were in the
Okay,
process.
thank you. And you're sending them out how?
We've been sending them out via the link and Facebook and the web and the
On the
town page.
Facebook page, town's Facebook page. So anyone interested in that should be looking for that on the town's Facebook page.
It'll come back out, yeah.
Okay, cool. And I had success with putting a QR code on the back of the town newsletter for the Citizen Advisory Council to the Mayor's survey that was done, so that might be something you want to consider
Okay.
as well. I have two things to point out. One is directly behind Councilman Schofield. I don't know if the camera can please go that way. This is our town seal. It was carved in a single piece of wood. None of that, that's all relief. That's not an applique. It's a single piece of wood carved out by a woodworker, craftsman by the name of Rudy Strom, who for a moment in time was working out of one of the warehouses, formerly known as Dunright Buildings. He's moving back to Wyoming. So he's leaving Sykesville, but he has the ability to create this as many times as anyone here in this room or in the town would like, in any size, to hang in your home or in your office. I know I'm going to be doing that. So I wanted to call that out, and I think that's lovely. And then the other announcement that I have is just a short story, so bear with me. It will only take, look, Al just was like, oh. It will literally only take 90 seconds. I've been meeting with Senator Katie Hester regularly since last May when I was elected mayor. And so now I get to share some big news about what happens when two process-driven, people-focused women come together. Back in November, Senator Hester helped me bring the right people to Sykesville Station for lunch and a tour of downtown at South Branch Park. I shared my decade-long dream of redeveloping the vacant apple butter factory warehouse in South Branch Park, as well as our need for an improved pedestrian connection between the park and Main Street. So there I was, leading my four guests, Senators Hester, Zucker, Gazone, and McCrae, across the bridge, all of whom are key to the legislative bond initiative process. And we had, of course, to walk in single file line because there isn't sufficient space for two people to walk side by side, which was purposefully planned for me to do that. As I explained what an improved bridge would look like, a vehicle driving northbound on West Friendship Road met us as we exited the south end of the bridge, exemplifying my point about safety concerns and no connection to the park from the bridge. We talked about bicycle, baby stroller, and handicap access, and what a luxury it would be for two people to be able to walk side by side or for one person to pass another on the bridge. I presented my distant dreams for a thoughtfully developed riverfront, while I pointed at the newly installed pervious paver parking lot at South Branch Park and said how it will never be fully utilized or its value realized until there is a safe way for people to access Main Street from the park. I then shared my more personal vision for the apple butter factory warehouse, perhaps a performing arts venue, inclusive of arts education or entertainment opportunities, while noting the need for us to first go through a feasibility study to identify the best use for the building and the cost associated with such a study. Now, fast forward 6 months. See, I told you I'd get you there to the present very quickly. Fast forward 6 months, and Senate Bill 291 passes and includes, and I read verbatim, $1 million for fiscal year 2023 for the town of Sykesville infrastructure improvements, to provide a grant to the mayor and town council of the town of Sykesville for the acquisition, planning, design, construction, repair, renovation, reconstruction, site improvement, and capital equipping of infrastructure improvements for the town of Sykesville, including for bridge improvements and a warehouse. But, first, you must know this is not matching. It's no strings attached, and we have 5 years to spend this money. But wait, there's more. Another $1 million has been budgeted for fiscal year 2024. That's right. We are receiving a total of $2 million of state investment for the realization of safe pedestrian connectivity between South Branch Park and Main Street, as well as a thoughtful redevelopment of the apple butter factory warehouse. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. We are adjourned at 8:42 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.